Welcome to your deep dive, all about personal and interpersonal effectiveness.
Using, of course, the principles from Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, and we're going to tailor this exploration just for you.
Working for the excerpts that you provided.
Exactly, ready to unlock some timeless wisdom.
Absolutely.
He starts the book with this fascinating optical illusion. He describes a picture, asks what you see, but the trick is there are actually two images hidden within the picture.
Have you ever encountered this one?
I have. It's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic example of how our paradigms shape our perceptions. Covey uses it brilliantly to illustrate that what we see often depends more on our pre-existing beliefs and assumptions than on objective reality.
Okay, so paradigms. So let's unpack this idea of paradigms. How would you explain it in a way that connects to our everyday lives?
We'll think of it like this. A paradigm is like a mental map, a set of filters we use to make sense of the world. It's built from our experiences, our upbringing, our values, and just like a map, it can be incredibly useful for navigating familiar territory.
Right.
But what happens when we encounter something new, something that challenges our existing map?
That's when things get interesting, right?
That's when things get interesting, right? Because if our mental map is outdated or incomplete, it can actually prevent us from seeing things clearly and making effective choices.
Absolutely.
Covey argues that many of us are operating from paradigms that limit our potential.
And he calls those.
Paradigms he calls the personality ethic,
Okay.
which focus on superficial techniques and quick fixes for external success. But true effectiveness, the kind that leads to lasting fulfillment, comes from what he calls the character ethic, a principle-centered approach to life.
So how do we make that shift from the personality ethic to the character ethic? How do we start to redraw our mental maps to be more aligned with effectiveness?
Well, that's where the 7 Habits come in.
Right.
They provide a framework for building a strong internal foundation based on timeless principles like integrity, responsibility, and continuous learning. It's about moving from dependence to independence and ultimately to interdependence.
Okay, and speaking of interdependence, I'm curious to know, how does this concept resonate with your current goals?
Well, before we dive into interdependence,
Hmm.
which Covey addresses in Habits 4, 5, and 6,
Okay.
let's explore some of the foundational habits for building personal effectiveness.
Right.
These are the habits that empower us to become independent and proactive individuals.
Sounds good. So where should we start?
Let's jump into Habit 1. Be proactive.
Okay.
This is where Covey really challenges us to take ownership of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that we're not just passive responders to external stimuli, but we have the power to choose our response.
Right.
It's about recognizing that space between stimulus and response, as he calls it, where our freedom lies.
It's like we have this pause button that we can hit, a moment to decide how we're going to react, rather than just letting our emotions or habits take over.
Exactly. Covey tells a story about his daughter not wanting to share her toys with other children. Instead of forcing her to share or giving in to her demands, he and his wife took a proactive approach.
Interesting.
They helped her understand the natural consequences of her choices, that if she didn't share, others might not want to play with her.
That's a great example. So how can we apply this principle of proactivity to the challenges we face at work? Those situations where we feel stuck or tempted to blame others.
Well, it starts with recognizing when we're falling into reactive patterns.
Mhm.
Ask yourself, am I focusing on things I can control, or am I wasting energy on things I can't? Am I taking responsibility for my own actions and choices, or am I blaming others for my circumstances?
Yeah. I'm thinking about a situation at work right now where I'm feeling really frustrated with a colleague. It's easy to get caught up in the blame game, but maybe there's a more proactive approach.
Absolutely. Proactivity isn't about ignoring challenges or pretending everything is fine.
Right.
It's about channeling your energy into finding solutions and focusing on what you can do to improve the situation.
Yeah. It's about shifting from a mindset of I can't to how can I?
Exactly. It's a subtle shift, but it can be incredibly empowering. Now, building on this foundation of proactivity, let's move to Habit 2, which Covey calls begin with the end in mind.
I love this one. It can be a bit daunting, but ultimately it's about aligning our actions with our deepest values and goals. Covey famously asks us to imagine ourselves and our own funeral and consider what we would want people to say about us.
It's a powerful exercise, isn't it?
Yeah.
It forces us to confront what truly matters, to define our own definition of success.
Right.
It's about making sure we're climbing the right ladder, as the saying goes.
Right, because achieving external success without a clear sense of purpose can leave us feeling empty and unfulfilled.
And speaking of making sure we're on the right path, habit 3, put first things first, provides us with a practical framework for prioritizing our time and energy.
This is where Covey introduces his famous time management matrix, which helps us categorize our activities into 4 quadrants based on urgency and importance.
Quadrant 1 is for those urgent and important tasks, the true crises and emergencies.
Yep.
Quadrant 3 is for things that feel urgent but aren't actually important, those distractions and interruptions that can derail our day.
Okay.
Quadrant 3 is for those time wasters that are neither urgent nor important, but the real magic, as you mentioned earlier, happens in Quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2, the land of important but not urgent.
Exactly.
It's where we invest in those activities that contribute to our long-term goals and well-being, things like building relationships, planning for the future, and taking care of ourselves.
It's the quadrant that's often neglected because it doesn't have the same immediate pressure as the others.
Right.
But it's where we create the foundation for a truly effective and fulfilling life.
Covey uses a great anecdote about delegating the task of mowing the lawn to his son to illustrate the power of Quadrant 2 addiction.
At first glance, it might have seemed more efficient for Covey to mow the lawn himself.
Yeah,
But by investing the time to teach his son how to do it properly,
right.
he was not only freeing up his own time in the future, but also empowering his son to develop valuable life skills.
It's a perfect example of playing the long game, of focusing on what truly matters, even when it doesn't feel urgent.
And speaking of playing the long game, let's transition to one of the most impactful habits in Covey's framework. Habit 6, synergize.
Oh, I love this one. It's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly.
It's about the magic that happens when people with different perspectives and talents come together to create something truly extraordinary.
Covey emphasizes that synergy isn't just about teamwork or compromise.
Right.
It's about valuing differences and seeing them as opportunities for creativity and innovation. It's about recognizing that we can achieve so much more when we collaborate with others in a spirit of mutual respect and understanding.
He tells a fascinating story about a planning meeting at an insurance company that was stuck in a rut. Instead of continuing their usual debate-driven approach, they decided to experiment with a more synergistic approach.
Embracing their differences and seeking to understand each other's perspectives.
And the results were remarkable.
Yes, they came up with a whole new vision for the company, far more innovative and effective than anything they could have imagined individually.
That's the true power of synergy.
The true power of synergy.
You know, that insurance company example reminds me of that optical illusion we discussed earlier. It's
Right.
like we're all looking at the same picture, but we're seeing different things based on our individual paradigms. Synergy is about stepping back and recognizing that there might be other perspectives, other images hidden within the picture that we haven't even considered.
That's a brilliant connection.
Yeah.
Synergy is about expanding our vision, challenging our assumptions, and opening ourselves up to the possibility of creating something truly remarkable together.
And speaking of expanding our vision, that reminds me of another key habit we haven't explored yet. Habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Ah, yes, the habit of renewal.
Covey uses a vivid analogy to describe it, a man who's so busy sawing down a tree that he doesn't take the time to sharpen his saw.
Of course, if he paused to sharpen the saw, the work would be much faster and easier.
It's a reminder that we can't be truly effective if we're running on empty. We need to prioritize self-renewal in all areas of our lives: physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional.
Absolutely. Physical renewal involves taking care of our bodies through exercise, nutrition, and sleep.
Okay.
Spiritual renewal is about connecting with our core values and finding a sense of purpose. Mental renewal involves keeping our minds sharp through learning and exploring new ideas.
Okay.
And social-emotional renewal focuses on nurturing our relationships and emotional well-being.
And it's different for everyone, right? There's no one-size-fits-all approach to self-renewal.
Exactly. What matters is that we're consciously making time for activities that nourish and replenish us in all 4 dimensions. So I'm curious, what does your personal self-renewal routine look like? Are there any areas you're neglecting? Or any areas you're particularly passionate about?
You know, that's a great question. I think I'm pretty good at prioritizing physical and mental renewal,
Okay.
but I could definitely do better with the spiritual and social-emotional aspects.
Yeah,
I've been meaning to start a meditation practice and spend more quality time with loved ones.
those sound like wonderful goals.
Yeah.
And remember, even small steps in the right direction can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is a great place to pause for now.
Yep.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, exploring the foundational habits for personal effectiveness.
We've delved into proactivity, beginning with the end in mind, prioritizing effectively with quadrant 2 thinking, and embracing the power of synergy. And of course, we've touched on the importance of sharpening the saw, that vital habit of renewal.
Right. We'll pick up in part two with a deeper exploration of interdependence and how to apply Covey's principles to create truly meaningful and fulfilling relationships. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to your personalized deep dive into the 7 habits.
In part one, we really focused on those habits that build personal effectiveness, that strong inner foundation.
Exactly. And as you master those private victories, you become capable of something truly special. Effective interdependence.
It's like leveling up in a video game, right?
Yeah.
You've got your skills and your equipment sorted. Now you're ready to team up and take on bigger challenges.
Precisely. And Covey dedicates a whole section of the book to what he calls public victories.
Okay.
Habits 4, 5, and 6, which are all about building strong, mutually beneficial relationships.
So let's jump right into habit 4, think win-win.
Okay.
It's a phrase we hear all the time, but Covey argues that it's more than just a negotiation tactic.
Its whole philosophy of
Yeah.
human interaction.
It's about approaching every interaction with the belief that there's a solution that will benefit everyone involved, not just a zero-sum game where one person wins at the expense of another.
Exactly. Covey contrasts win-win with other paradigms like win-lose, where it's all about competition and dominance, or lose-win, where one person constantly gives in to avoid conflict.
Right.
He argues that these approaches ultimately erode trust and damage relationships.
He does. What's fascinating here is that Covey acknowledges that win-win can be tough to achieve, especially when you're interacting with people who are deeply scripted and win-lose thinking.
Right.
But he offers a framework for creating win-win agreements that involve 5 key dimensions.
Yeah, he talks about the importance of having clearly defined desired results, guidelines for how to achieve those results, resources to support the process, accountability measures, and consequences for both success and failure.
Okay.
It's a structured approach that takes the ambiguity out of win-win.
And remember, win-win isn't just about getting what you want.
It's about finding solutions that satisfy the needs of everyone involved.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might mean walking away from a deal if a mutually beneficial outcome isn't possible.
Okay, let's move on to habit 5, which is one of the most profound principles in the entire book. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Got it.
This is where empathy takes center stage.
Covey argues that most people listen with the intent to reply, not to understand. We're often so focused on formulating our own response that we don't truly hear what the other person is saying.
He calls this,
Autobiographical listening.
right.
We filter everything through our own experiences and biases. We evaluate, we probe, we advise, or we interpret, but we rarely truly listen with the intent to deeply understand.
And instead he offers,
Covey introduces the concept of empathic listening, which goes beyond just hearing words to understanding the speaker's feelings and frame of reference.
right.
It's about putting yourself in their shoes and seeing the world through their eyes.
So how do we do that?
He outlines specific techniques for becoming a more empathic listener, like mirroring back the speaker's words and feelings,
Yeah.
validating your perspective and withholding judgment.
Right.
It takes real effort and practice, but the rewards are immense.
It does. Empathic listening is a powerful deposit in the emotional bank account.
Absolutely.
That metaphor Covey uses to describe the level of trust and goodwill we build in our relationships. It's about creating psychological safety so the other person feels seen, heard, and valued.
And once that foundation of understanding is established,
Right.
then you can effectively communicate your own perspective.
Right, but notice the order.
Yeah.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
It's a subtle but profound shift in mindset.
Absolutely. And this leads us beautifully into habit 6, synergize. We touched on this in part 1.
Yes.
But it's worth emphasizing how deeply this habit is connected to habits 4 and 5.
Synergy is the magic that happens when people with different perspectives and ideas come together in a spirit of mutual respect and understanding.
Yes.
It's about valuing differences and seeing them as opportunities for creativity and innovation.
Covey shares a story about a negotiation that was on the verge of collapse until one of the parties decided to shift from a defensive win-lose mindset to a collaborative win-win approach.
He took the time to truly understand the other party's perspective, and in doing so, He unlocked a whole new level of creative problem solving.
Yeah, instead of arguing over fixed positions, they started brainstorming new possibilities that had never even occurred to them before.
And the result was a solution that not only met the needs of both parties, but was far superior to anything they could have come up with individually.
That's synergy.
Synergy isn't about conformity or compromise.
Right.
It's about creating something new and better through open-minded collaboration.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate expression of interdependence.
And it's important to remember that synergy isn't limited to professional settings.
It can happen in families, in communities, in any relationship,
Right.
where people are willing to come together with a spirit of openness and respect.
Exactly. So as we wrap up part 2 of your deep dive, I'd like to leave you with this question. Where in your life do you see the potential for greater synergy? What relationships could be transformed by embracing these principles of win-win, empathic listening, and valuing differences? We're back for the final part of your deep dive into the 7 habits.
And we've circled back to where we started. Remember that optical illusion Covey uses at the beginning of the book?
Yeah.
Well, now that we've explored the 7 habits, we're ready to reveal the solution.
Oh, that's right. I'd almost forgotten about it. It's amazing how our journey through the habits has shifted my perspective. I'm actually seeing the book in a whole new light.
Exactly, and that's the power of paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
The optical illusion Covey uses shows either a young woman or an old woman, depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right or wrong answer. It's simply a matter of perspective.
So after all this discussion of the 7 habits, are we ready to see both images in the illusion now?
We are. It's like Covey is saying that by developing these habits, we're essentially training our minds to see more possibilities, to become more aware of our own paradigms and how they shape our perceptions.
Wow, that's a really cool way to tie it all together. It's like the habits themselves are a set of lenses that help us see the world more clearly and effectively.
Precisely. And speaking of seeing things more clearly, let's dive into habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Okay.
This habit is all about maintaining and enhancing our greatest asset, ourselves.
You know, it's interesting how this habit seems to encompass all the others.
It does.
It's like the foundation for sustaining all the growth and effectiveness we've been talking about.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
We need to continuously renew ourselves in all 4 dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional.
So let's break those down. What are some practical examples of how we can sharpen the saw in each of these areas?
Well, physical renewal is about taking care of our bodies through things like exercise, healthy eating, and getting enough sleep. It's about having the energy and stamina to show up fully in all areas of our lives.
I can definitely relate to that. I find that when I'm neglecting my physical well-being, everything else suffers.
Yeah.
My productivity plummets, my mood dips, and my relationships feel strained.
It's a domino effect. And remember, Covey emphasizes that physical renewal isn't just about aesthetics or vanity.
Right.
It's about investing in our health and vitality so we can live our lives to the fullest.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about spiritual renewal? This one feels a bit more nuanced and personal.
It is. It's about connecting with our core values, our sense of purpose, and something greater than ourselves.
Okay.
It could involve practices like meditation, prayer, spending time in nature, or engaging in acts of service.
I've been experimenting with meditation lately, and I've found it to be incredibly grounding and clarifying. It helps me connect with my inner peace and prioritize what truly matters.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, spiritual renewal is a deeply personal journey. What works for one person might not work for another. The key is to find practices that resonate with you and help you tap into your own sense of meaning and purpose.
Okay, let's move on to mental renewal. I'm guessing this is all about lifelong learning and expanding our minds.
You got it. It's about staying curious, engaging in thought-provoking conversations, reading books, learning new skills, and exploring new ideas.
Yeah, I find that mental stimulation is essential for my well-being. If I'm not learning and growing, I start to feel stagnant and uninspired.
It's like our minds need exercise just as much as our bodies do. And it's not just about accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It's about developing critical thinking skills, creativity, and the ability to see the world from multiple perspectives.
Absolutely. And finally, we have social emotional renewal. This one seems particularly relevant in today's world where so many people are feeling disconnected and isolated.
It is. Social emotional renewal is about nurturing our relationships, cultivating empathy and compassion, and building a strong support system.
So it's about making time for meaningful connections with loved ones, practicing active listening, and being present in our interactions.
And remember, social emotional renewal also involves taking care of our own emotional well-being.
Okay.
It's about developing self-awareness, managing our stress levels, and practicing self-compassion.
As we're talking about all these different dimensions of self-renewal, I'm realizing how interconnected they really are. It's
Yeah.
like they all feed into each other, creating a virtuous cycle of growth and well-being.
That's a beautiful insight. They're not separate silos, but rather interwoven aspects of a holistic approach to living a fulfilling and effective life.
So, to bring it all back to the beginning, it seems like Covey's 7 Habits framework provides a powerful roadmap for personal and interpersonal effectiveness.
Absolutely.
It's about building a strong inner foundation based on timeless principles and then using that foundation to create meaningful and lasting change in the world.
And it's not a one-time fix, but rather a continuous journey of growth and improvement. It requires self-awareness, discipline, and a commitment to lifelong learning.
Right, but the rewards are immense. By embracing these habits, we can create lives of greater purpose, meaning, and fulfillment.
We can build stronger relationships, achieve greater success, and make a positive impact on the world.
And as Covey reminds us, the space between stimulus and response is the key to our growth and happiness.
What will you choose to do with that space?
It's a powerful question to ponder. We hope this deep dive has given you valuable insights and practical tools to apply to your own life.
Keep sharpening that saw.
And happy reading.